Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Saints Hall of Fame golf tournament was on Monday, which means it's an opportunity to hear from Mickey Loomis and Dennis Allen and the like. And there was a couple of interesting things out of this media availability that came out. One involving Marshon Lattimore and his future with the team very definitively. I'll get to that in a second. But I thought this was interesting also. As the Saints are certainly in need of a veteran offensive lineman, even after drafting Taliesin Fuanga. We know that they signed Lucas Patrick, who's a veteran interior player. I love the signing. We talked about him last week about how that's a very sneaky, underrated signing of a 30-year-old that's played all three positions on the interior. Matt LaFleur raved about him, called him the glue of their offensive line in Green Bay. I'm very excited about that signing and his opportunity on this team. But Mickey Loomis did acknowledge that they tried to re-sign Andrus Peat.
You know, Andrus is a good example. We made, attempts to get him re-signed, and he chose to go someplace else, which that's what free agency is about. And look, Andrus was a good pick for us and played for us for a long time. Excited for him. I know he's got a new chapter. He's probably excited about a new team, and wish him nothing but the best of luck.
Yeah, so he didn't talk about, there was no disclosure there on terms of what the Saints offered. Perhaps it's one of those things where the Saints had what they were willing to offer Andrus Peat, and the Raiders went above it. Or maybe he felt like there were a better opportunity to make the team and to play in Las Vegas than in New Orleans. Who really knows what and why? Maybe Andrus Peat eventually will be transparent about that at some point. I'm sure that day will come eventually. But it goes to show you it's another admission by this front office that, yes, they realize very much so that you can, I say it all the time, actions speak louder than words. You can like your pick of Taliesin Fuanga. You can be hopeful and optimistic that Trevor Penning is ready to be a starter. But those are still giant question marks. And so you have to add veteran bodies. That's now 3 veteran offensive linemen the Saints have signed since the draft. And remember, they signed Oli Udoh before the draft. So that's 4 veteran free agent offensive linemen they've signed on top of drafting 2 linemen this year, including the number 14 overall pick. So yes, still a long way to go. But I thought it was interesting that they didn't just let Andrus Peat walk. They did try to re-sign him. He chose the Raiders. But I still happen to believe Lucas Patrick is a better option than Andrus Peat. The one difference there is Peat can play left tackle. Patrick isn't a tackle. So if they do end up needing a rotation there, they look somewhere else among the core of players they have trying to earn a roster spot. But maybe of greater importance was what Dennis Allen said about Marshon Lattimore. Now, remember, if you connect the dots with us, and we've talked about this a good bit here over the past months, it's been sort of conflicting when Mickey Loomis has talked about Marshon Lattimore. I mean, around the NFL meetings, it sounded like maybe Marshon Lattimore could be a trade target, and then around the draft, seemingly close that door. But then we heard Loomis say, look, you could always consider if you get that Godfather type offer, the offer you can't refuse. So it made many wonder, well, are they looking at trading him? And when you look at Marshon Lattimore's contract, which we talked about last week, there is a possibility. If you look at a post June 1 trade or release, the Saints would have a massive financial savings if they got rid of Lattimore. Then the real question is, what could you get for him? And we talked about it last week. I think there was a piece by Bill Barnwell up at ESPN.com that compared the Jalen Ramsey trade. And when Ramsey went from the Rams to the Dolphins, they got a 3. I mean, the Rams got a 3 for Jalen Ramsey. What would New Orleans get for Marshon Lattimore, who's missed 17 games the last 2 years? They said 5 that could become a conditional 4. Which, if you're New Orleans, you essentially make the decision, well, is it worth saving the money and getting some asset for Lattimore, or having him help you win this year and possibly seeing him leave after this season? Or you restructure his deal next year and we see how it all plays out. But Dennis Allen told us point blank on Monday how this is going to go.
I had a conversation with him probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. I thought it was a positive conversation. And so, we're moving forward.
So we're moving forward. positive conversation. We're moving forward with Lattimore on the team. I still don't know that definitively means the way he says it that there's no chance they move forward. But it sounds like Allen is saying, and Loomis said that they're moving forward with Lattimore on the team. Great. Cleared the air, all that stuff. But one of the things that you're going to have to consider is Paulson Adebo. And I hadn't looked this deeply into it until, last week I bumped across this thing over at PFF by Zoltan Boudet. And he ranked or listed what he said was the most underrated player on each NFL team. That's completely subjective, and that's not even the most interesting thing. But one of the things he pointed out was a comp with L'Jarius Sneed, who just signed a massive deal this offseason. L'Jarius Sneed, who had been with Kansas City, of course we know who is from Louisiana and from Minden, went to Louisiana Tech, was a third-round pick of the Chiefs, and just signed a free agent deal with Tennessee this offseason, valued at, here it is, $76.4 million. A 4-year, $76.4 million contract is what he signed this offseason in Tennessee. And the reason I bring that up, and keep in mind, Sneed is 27 years old. Paulson Adebo is 25 years old. So Sneed is 2 years older than Adebo. But since Adebo came into the league, Paulson Adebo is tied with L'Jarius Sneed with 33 passes defensed. And Sneed also has the same number of interceptions, 7, while playing in 4 more games than Adebo. So effectively, to say it in a cleaner way, since Adebo came into the league in 2021, he and L'Jarius Sneed have identical numbers. And Sneed just signed a 4-year, $76 million contract with Tennessee. So after this year, if Paulson Adebo plays at the level he's played up until this point in his career, it is certainly plausible to look and say Paulson Adebo would be in line for a deal that would parallel or mirror what L'Jarius Sneed got. So the New Orleans Saints have to sit back here and look. I mean, this obviously explains the Kool-Aid McKinstry signing or draft pick, because one of two things happens in this offseason. Next offseason, I should say. Either you're going to watch Marshon Lattimore leave for all the financial reasons against the cap, or you're going to restructure that deal and extend him and watch Paulson Adebo sign a giant free agent deal somewhere else and leave. But either way, drafting Kool-Aid McKinstry gave you the security blanket that if you want to move on from Lattimore post-June 1 this year, you can. But if you keep Lattimore and want Lattimore beyond this season, you still have that option if you're not going to pay Paulson Adebo $76 million. Which, as odd as that is to say or think, because I don't think we've thought, you might think of that number financially as like a number one cornerback number, and it feels that way. He's played to that level. Paulson Adebo has played to that level. He just happens to be on the roster with a cornerback that signed a $100 million deal. Or $90 million deal. So some of that kind of starts to come into focus when you look at what the market likely will be for Paulson Adebo after this season if he plays at the level he has up until this point. And the Saints, quite honestly, may not be ready to pay that number, which might be why they're more inclined to say, let's continue riding with Marshon Lattimore. Maybe we restructure next year with something that makes more sense financially. So all that we'll learn in due time. But every time Mickey Loomis or Dennis Allen speak on the record about the Lattimore situation, you better believe it's going to be interesting because he's an expensive player. He's a dynamic player when he's healthy, and you just used a second-round pick on a guy that you think could be a day one starter. And you have another guy at that same position who's in line for a potential $70+ million contract after this season. So a lot for this front office to juggle at that cornerback position. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.